Hey, fellow mathers. Before we get into this episode, have we got some really important information?
Y'all, registration is now open for our Building Powerful Mathematics online workshops. I know you're as excited as we are because this is where the magic happens. The why, when, how, the details, the experience, making real mathing happen in you and your classroom.
Building your numeracy, your mathematics, gaining insight into which models and strategies to use, seeing the teacher moves in action, and more is all jam-packed into these content-rich online workshops that you can take anytime, any day on your schedule. We've got workshops for teachers kindergarten through grade 12. Head on over to mathisfigureoutable.com/workshops to find your best fit. That's mathisfigureoutable.com/workshops.
Registration is only open for a short time, so book your spot before it's too late. Now on to the episode.
I'm sure the episode's going to be great. Hey, fellow mathers. Welcome to the podcast where math is FigureOutable. I'm Pam Harris, a former mimicker turned mather.
And I'm Kim Montague, a reasoner who now knows how to share her thinking with others. At Math is FigureOutable, we are on a mission to improve math teaching.
We know that algorithms are amazing human achievements, but they're not good teaching tools because mimicking step-by-step procedures can actually trap students into using less sophisticated reasoning than the problems are intended to develop.
In this podcast, we help you teach mathing, building relationships with your students, and grappling with mathematical relationships.
We invite you to join us to make math more figure-outable.
Okay, listeners, so sometimes we record these podcasts ahead of time. And sometimes we do it right away because, schedules or whatever. This episode won't come out for a few weeks, but Pam, you're back. You've been gone for so long.
Oh my gosh, that was the longest trip ever.
We actually are trying to cram absolutely everything in because Pam's been gone for a month on some fabulous journeys and we haven't even really spoken. So tell me all about it. Tell us what's going on.
Oh, Kim, I had an amazing experience down under. So I was able to travel to Australia and I probably traveled a bit too much while I was in Australia.
We missed you.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It was kind of one of those things where by the time we kind of arranged all of the gigs that I was doing there, then trying to fit them all in, it just made it that I traveled a bit. Hey, did you know Australia is like really big? Which is kind of funny. Yeah.
The map says so.
My husband was like, it is a continent. I was like, oh, that's true.
Were you, I know you went to work so much, to see so many schools and whatever, but did you sightsee at all?
I did a little. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just outline just quickly because it's fun for me. So the first thing I did was go to ICME, the International Congress of Mathematics Educators. And that is a every 4 years conference that goes around the world. And this is actually the first time I've been able to attend.
That's cool.
It's a week-long conference, and I just kind of never took that long when my kids were home. And now that I'm an empty nester, it's sort of easier for me to kind of go and be gone for a while. I met so many fantastic people. I don't even want to start naming names because I'll forget somebody, but Eddie Wu and his growth team were unbelievable. And, Tierney Kennedy and I should stop because I'm just not going to mention everybody, but I had a wonderful, I met several people in the United States that I don't see very often. Tad Watanabe, who often writes a blog post after our podcast episodes. We're so honored that he does that. It was amazing to meet him and chat, such a thoughtful guy. Anyway, I just had an amazingly marvelous time. Heard lots and lots of interesting things. It's a bit researchy, I'll say that, which isn't bad. It's just a little sometimes not as teacher applicable. But that was a whole week. And I did that in Sydney. Again, marvelous time. And then I flew to the Great Barrier Reef. So I stayed in Cairns and did a snorkeling tour. So that was the bit of sightseeing.
It's cool.
And I did one other, I'll tell you in a sec. Then I flew to Perth. That's across the country. So that's a bit like flying from New York to LA. That I had to go through Adelaide. And then I guess I flew the budget airline. Who knew? I don't know. Somebody just told me. Yeah. So I had to actually I had to get my bag and then recheck it in Adelaide.
Oh,
I've never had to do that. That was new and interesting. Yeah. But on domestic flights, you can totally take water. I found that out. So that was nice. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, then I had a great day in Perth with the Mathematical Association of Western Australia. What a fantastic group that I worked with there. Thank you so much for having me. Then I flew to Melbourne. I did a day with a school at Bacchus. Oh, God, now I'm saying the name of the school wrong. Bacchus Marsh. Sorry, that took me a minute. Bacchus Marsh, a fantastic day with teachers there at that school. Thank you for having me there. And then the next day, I was in Melbourne at the Mathematical Association Victoria. Probably the funnest day that I had with educators, just because they laughed at everything I said. I was super funny that day, and I got to meet Michael Minus. I don't even know if I'm saying his last name correctly, but he's fantastic. He has a great YouTube channel with fantastic videos of him and his children playing games.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't know he was going to be there. And he walked in the room and he's like, I don't know if you know me. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're the guy with the kids. And Nash is your kid. He's like, you actually do watch my videos. Anyway, so it was kind of fun. It was super to meet him. I feel like I met somebody else there that now I'm forgetting. Sorry. Anyway, had a great day with a group of educators there. Such fantastic, thoughtful folks. Then the global IT outage hit while I was in Melbourne. That was a bit of, I was trying to get back to Sydney because I had some things planned in Sydney. And I tell you, they tell me that Aussies are laid back. Australia, well done. When I walked into the terminal, there was about 400 people standing with their suitcases all ready to like check in, and nobody's checking in. And Kim, I looked at the monitor and I was like, what's happening? Because the monitor was just kind of like sitting there, nothing happening. And so I turned to this, nice gentleman who was kind of standing in line. I said, hey, what's happening? And he goes, well, I think there's a global IT outage. We don't really know what's going on. This is not like an airline employee or anything. This is just like some random traveler.
Mm-hmm.
And Kim, everyone in that very, very large terminal was just quietly standing there, just patiently waiting for information about whether their flight was going to get canceled or
I can guarantee there is no city in the United States that was like that.
I mean, and I said something and they were like, really? Like, what would they be doing? Like throwing stuff? I was like, no, not throwing stuff, but like people would be agitated and there would be
panicking.
Like, it was so interesting. Anyway, I managed to get a flight back to Sydney, which I was so glad because here's the second bit of sightseeing. I was able to go on a Blue Mountain tour with a principal for one of the Northern Beaches schools. Luke, thank you. I got to meet his kids and his wife, and it was delightful. And a temperate rainforest, which is a new experience for me. I had a beautiful, very cold, fantastic day. Now, when I grew up in the cold, right? So I think I know what cold is. And you might say, Pam, it wasn't that cold. Well, we had snow.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cold because I just had a hoodie. And yeah, anyway, it was gorgeous, wonderful. So then back to Sydney and then northern Sydney and the northern beaches. Then I spent a day with 170 K6 teachers. That was brilliant. And then maybe my highlight of the trip, I was able to do 8 lab lessons. That's what they called them, where I went into 4 different schools. And I taught kindergarten through year 6.
Yeah.
And Kim, that's what I know I've spent way too much time talking about my trip. Y'all, if you're just like hating it, you've already tuned out. Too bad. Thank you for letting me share
It's
my
a trip
to
of
Australia.
A lifetime.
It was just amazing. But Kim, we wanted to talk maybe a little bit today about some of the things that came out of those lab lessons. So just to kind of give you a feel for it, I'd go to the school and then I would have just a couple minutes with teachers. I gave them a couple things to maybe think about and look for. And then the children came in. And so it's that moment where I'm like, and who are you? Like I've never met these kids before. I don't quite know where their maths. Did you notice the S there?
I did.
Maths in Australia. I didn't quite know where the maths are at that moment. And so, I usually played a little bit of a game first or whatever. And then I dove in and chose one of the strings that I kind of had pre-prepared thinking, guess.
You had more than one prepared for each of the groups?
Totally. Yeah. Because I really didn't have any sense and I'm so glad I did. There were several times based on the very introductory game that I did that I switched what I kind of thought I was going to do. So like for the young ones, I played I Have You Need a little bit where I showed fingers. And so I said, how many fingers do you see? And then how many do we need to make 10? I also played Guess My Number. I'm thinking of a number between 0 and 100, and then they would guess my number. And then based on that, then I would do a problem string. The part I wanted to share in the podcast today was it was really noteworthy to me that then I had the children for about a half an hour, which to be clear is really long with kindergartners.
Oh yeah.
That is a long time.
I'm surprised they can hang with you.
Well, so I played a game and then we did a string and then I played another game.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I kept things moving. They were fantastic. I actually was really impressed with the mathematics that were happening in their kindergarten and year 1. Yeah, it was quite a bit more than I was expecting. So those were the moments, those were at least some of the moments where I was glad I had the alternative string handy. As the children then left, which also I'll just say, 30 minutes is not that long with year six, because in both
Right.
of the year sixes that I did, I actually went over and didn't realize it. And at one point, the principal was like, and I was like, oh, sorry, look at the time. Okay, we're done. And one of them I noticed, and I looked up and I said, can I go one more minute? And they're like, yeah, we're loving it. So yeah, it was just interesting.
Because they're
Then
laid back, right? They're laid back.
oh, they were so laid back. It was great. Just like the right amount of laid back.
Yeah.
It was delightful. Anyway, so then the children would leave, the students would leave, and then the teachers and I had at least a half an hour at that point. And
Oh,
so,
love
you
that.
never kind of know how that's going to go.
Yeah.
Oh, Kim, they were so thoughtful. But here's
Oh,
what was
that's the
so
best.
yeah, it was
That's
off.
so I'm gonna cite like that's great
Okay,
PD.
okay.
That's like great PD setup.
Yes,
Like
yes, it
do
was brilliant.
preview for like 2 or 3 minutes. This is what I'm gonna do. Look for this. Do the thing. Debrief instantly if you can.
Well, and let me add to that we had the day before. So the day
Oh.
before with the 170 teachers, that were these teachers. So
Oh,
I had
okay.
all of these teachers in a room for a discussion for the entire day about real math and
Oh
mathing,
man,
and
that's awesome.
yeah, it really was. It was a really great setup. So in that 30-minute, the first thing I would do is say, take a couple of minutes, turn to a partner, and just let it all out. What are you thinking about? Like just like vomit your thoughts. And so we did that a little bit. And then I said, all right, now come back together. What do you want to talk about? And almost to a T in each of those 8 different sessions, the first thing that teacher said was, you wait a long time. That was the very
Yep.
and then they all kind of paused. They're like, wow, like you really wait before you. And I was like, say more about that. And they said, well, you just sounded so interesting that how long you waited. Now, Kim, I'm going to be really clear. There were a couple times that I would kind of categorize it as I waited long, but most of the time I don't think it was all that long. I just think it was longer than many of us are used to waiting,
Right.
especially because I wasn't allowing students to just call out.
Hmm.
I was asking for a private signal. Now, did kids call out a couple of times? A few times, kids would like pop out an answer, and I would say, when you've got an answer. Most of the time, they didn't, because I very clearly said, before I'm about to ask you a question, before you give me an answer, give me a thumbs up when
Hmm.
you have an answer. And I
Yep.
very clearly demonstrate. If you can see me right now, my thumbs in front of my
Of course
chest.
it is.
Like,
I
yeah.
picture it. I knew you were.
And then the kids would put their hand up, and I would just look at them, and I would put my hand on my chest. And if they didn't get the message, I would put my hand up and move it to a thumb on my chest.
Hmm.
And in fact, then teachers would remark, yeah, and then you didn't let it go. Like as the lesson moved on, 15 minutes later, when you ask another question, the hands went back up, you would remind
Hmm.
them again,
Hmm.
just quietly. Teachers would often note that I didn't make a big deal about the thumbs up. In fact, I would say, oh yeah, and I got that going by having this 5-minute discussion at the beginning, and having all the kids practice putting their thumb up, and having this big discussion about why and how and when. And they would look at me like, no, you didn't do that at all. I'm like, yes,
Right.
you don't need to do that. You just over and over, you just you're steady that you're not letting kids call out. When they would ask, yeah, how did you make it happen? I think, Kim, an important teacher move is the idea of a private signal. Now,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a thumb up. We often use thumbs up. I don't know why. I don't know why we chose thumbs up.
I don't know. It
Um,
works for us.
we saw it somewhere. Somebody the other day, I think in our teacher Facebook group, said something about an index finger up. Whatever, I don't care, as long as it's private, right? It's all about not interrupting other kids' thinking.
Hmm.
What else can you help me? What private signal does?
Well, I appreciate that you said that it wasn't a big like uh, lesson ahead of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a simple move, but the biggest issue that we run into that people are saying my kids won't do it is because the teacher lacks consistency using it
Mm-hmm.
over time, over the first day or two that they introduce it in the first chunk of time. And so there's no reason for students to alter their behavior or the way that they've been giving answers in the past
Mm-hmm.
if they kind of can do whatever and they get called on anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Or they can shout out and the teacher
mhm,
runs with it.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that came up was that I also there how do I say it? There were specific times where I did have students call out, but that's when I asked for a choral response.
Mhm.
So, it's not that I always wait for a thumbs up. If the first question or one of the questions in the string is kind of a gimme, it's kind of everybody knows, I'm not gonna wait long on that. That we have to kind of be conscious of when to wait, when not to wait, and don't put too much onus, don't put too much, stress when the problem's, too easy. Everybody's got it. If you're like, "Okay, everybody, I really want you to share your thinking on this one," and the kids are all like, there's no thinking on this
Mhm.
one," then
Mhm.
that's a weird, you kind of don't it's not wait time all the time. It's only
Mhm.
wait time when kids actually need to put some thinking into it. Yeah. So then one of the things that they would say is, "So we noticed that you took a long time, you waited." And then they would kind of be, again, very thoughtful folks, very thoughtful educators. They would say, "But Pam, what would you do in a class to keep everybody engaged?" Which always makes me smile just a little bit, because then I would just shoot back with, "Well, how did I keep everybody engaged?" Now, let me be clear, Kim. I was a guest. It was a new experience. Some of the time we were actually in a different space. Like in a couple of the schools, they brought the kids into the library. So the kids were
Yeah.
kind of in this new. So, of course, you could say, well, I mean, Pam, you're this guest, whatever. Of course, the kids were acting differently for you. And I would grant that is probably partially true. But I would also ask, when we're in it and the kids have been there for a few minutes, they forget that they're in a new space. They forget, like, they're just in it. They're just thinking. They're kids. They're just diving in, whatever. So, what were the things? And I would shoot back. What were the things, after acknowledging, of course, things were different, but what were the things that I did? Like, did you notice that there were kids who weren't engaged? And that actually, I think, caused teachers to be kind of reflective and go, "Oh, well, yeah, like 30 minutes into it, you still had all the kids engaged. Huh, how did
Mhm.
you do that?" And then it became less about like, how would you do that? And a little bit more of like, how did I do that? Like, what
Mhm.
were the kinds of things that happened? And so, I'll just mention a few things. One of them is the private signal. And I know we've just talked about that, but asking for a private signal gets kids, how do I say this? When asking for a private signal, there were definitely times where I had kids who were about jumping out of their socks. Like they had their hand on their chest and they were beating their chest, like with their thumb, and they were like, "Picky, picky," and they were done. And I was still waiting for other kids. In that moment, there were definitely a few times where I could get that kid's eye and I could go, "I see you. Like, I see
Mhm.
you." And in that moment, that is often enough for a kid to go, "Okay, all right, I have been acknowledged. The teacher has noticed that I'm done. I can kind of take a breath." It's almost that in this age of to be done first is the thing, that they're almost like they can't stop kind of panicking until they get called on. But as soon as they're acknowledged, like, "I see you," they go like, "Okay, all right, I've been seen." And then they can
Mhm.
some, not everybody, but many of them can just kind of relax a little bit more. Another thing that I'll mention that was very purposeful is that the discussion then wasn't about answers, it was about thinking.
Mhm.
And keeping the discussion centered around thinking has the kids not just, "I got an answer, call on me," but like, "Ooh, how am I thinking about that?"
Mhm.
And giving them a chance to like think about stuff, not just like, "I'm done, I have an answer, call on me."
Well, I'm going to jump in because when
Mhm.
you have a classroom who's focused on that's focused on answers, and somebody says 14, like all you
Mhm.
can do is hear the number. There's literally nothing you can do to think about that. But
Yeah.
when you call in a kid and what you're asking them to do is describe and use words to talk about their thinking and the
Mhm.
strategy they used, then you have to be cognitively involved to listen to what they're saying, and you almost can't not picture it. Like you're listening and you're trying to make sense of what they're saying, and so you're more involved. And for some students who have some, alternative strategies, they're thinking about what that person said and almost instantly comparing to what they did.
Connecting to their
Mhm.
thinking. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Is
Yeah.
this like what I did? Is it different than what I did? And I'm sure you're then also asking if that didn't happen naturally, you're saying, how is that like what so and so did?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing that I did, a few times was, there was a couple of times where I was pretty clear, yeah, I was about to say in older grades classes, but I'm not actually sure. So, in a few situations where I was pretty sure that I had a few students who were kinda checked out.
Mhm.
And I just, Kim, you and I both can't abide that, right? Like, we will do everything we can to make sure that kid knows that their job is to be cognitively involved.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so now we don't use those words with kids, like, right? But
Be cognitively involved.
yeah, we would not say that. But what we would do is look at that kid and we would like raise our eyebrows and we would
Uh-huh.
be like, "Are you thinking about it?" Like, oh, and we might repeat the question. We might say it's everyone's job right now to be thinking about that.
Mhm.
So there was at least a couple instances where that I was like, I want to make sure these kids have enough time to think about it. And I even made a beeline at one point. I said, turn and talk to your partner about what you're thinking about. And I walked right over to this one particular young lady and I said, what are you thinking about? And she kind of looked at me and I was like, the problem is this. And she's like, right. Okay. And I could tell she kind of clicked in and I walked
Mhm.
away. I was like, once she clicked in, I was like, okay, good. You're thinking about it. There was another time where I said, hey, if you're, there were, I don't know, probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 kids that were just like, jumping out of their, they were sitting on the floor. So they were kind of like bouncing. And I wanted to just kind of calm them a little bit while everybody else was thinking. And so I said, if you've got something, what hint could you give that won't give it
Mhm.
away? It won't give it away, but what hint could you give?
Mhm.
That can be a really good way to get kids who are ready to kind of, they've got some really good thinking going on. They're ready to say their answer and they're kind of getting a little bored. It's going on a little bit longer to kind of keep them going, thinking
Yeah.
about stuff. A hint, anytime you sort of generalize or ask kids to kind of give a hint is a really nice way to kind of keep kids going while their kids are thinking.
Yeah, so do you have more?
Well, go ahead.
I was gonna say something else.
Go
So,
ahead.
globally, everything that
Mhm.
you're saying, I just wanna summarize in
Mm,
that you are engaging with the students the entire time. And I know that can be really tricky and there's a lot on teachers' plates, but never are you like reading the next part of your lesson or doing attendance if you were and I know you don't have to do that now visiting
right, right,
classrooms,
right.
but once the
Oh,
time
I didn't, I
starts.
didn't, I didn't walk around and chat with
Yeah, yeah.
teachers.
You
Yeah.
this is a communication between you and the students the entire time. So the eye contact, the nodding, the raising your eyebrow, the walking over to them, the reminding the kid who did check out for a minute, hey, we're on this problem now. Like
Hmm.
all of that is managing what's happening in the classroom and during that lesson. And I think it's fair to say that sometimes we get distracted and do other things, and then we wonder why, students are also not fully engaged.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't think you've said this yet. When you say you have long wait time, not long, enough wait time,
Hmm.
it's also not that you're waiting for every single student to put their thumb up and to be ready to go.
Mm, that's a good point. Yeah. In fact, one of the beginning, I don't want to say mistakes, but one of the things teachers do when they begin to do problem strings is
Hmm.
they actually tend to wait. They'll walk around and wait until every kid has finished the problem.
Yep.
And I think that's what you're getting at.
Yep.
You don't have to wait until all thumbs are up. You don't have to wait until every kid's finished, but you do wait longer than when just kids yell out an answer. It's
Right.
longer than that, but it's not so long that everyone's bored in the class.
Yeah. There's a
Yeah,
sweet spot. And
there is a sweet spot.
the more you do work on wait time, the better you will get at finding the sweet spot with different groups of kids.
And that's definitely, I think, one of the professional things that we get better at as professionals. The more that, and that would be a great thing to have somebody come in and watch you, and literally that could be the thing that they sort of look for is your wait time and give you feedback on what they thought about it. If you video yourself teaching, that would be a fantastic
Hmm.
thing for you to kind of share with each other.
Hmm.
Kim, one other thing that I wanted to just mention that happened that I feel like is an important teacher move that teachers brought up and that we talked about is in a couple of those lab lessons that I did, students, when I was waiting, students kind of turned and whispered or, like 32 or whatever, like
Hmm.
some sort of answer to the student that I was waiting for. And in that instant, something that I've been cultivating for a while, that I've been thinking about for a while, and I've been getting better at, is I very politely said, "Oh, no, it's okay. This person's got that. You don't need to say it was Kim. Kim's got that. You don't. Kim gets to decide if she wants time or help. Like, and right now, so giving her the answer that just turns her brain off. Like that's not actually helpful. So Kim, you get to decide. And then I'm talking right at that kid, and I go, do you want their help or do you got this?" And the kid's like, yeah, or do you want some more time? And one of the time the kid said, no, I've got this, and said the answer and said their thinking. Another of
Mhm.
the time the kid said, yeah, actually I do want some help. And I said, well, then you can choose who you want to call on. And they called on one of their friends.
Mhm.
And one of the times the kid said, I think I just need more time. I just
Mhm.
need more time. And I was like, we're going to give you some more time. Thank you, Kim, for helping me with those words and that concept of giving kids time or help. And I love this idea of giving kids that agency where they get to choose. Teachers in every one of those lessons brought that up as that was super interesting for them to think about.
Yeah.
So I would offer to everybody, if your classroom is all about answers, then yeah, kids might dive in to try to save a kid. But if your classroom is about thinking, you can't tell some kid how to think.
Mhm.
And then kids don't need saving there. They get the agency to talk
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
time or help.
Mhm.
Yeah. Cool.
Love that. So I've been thinking as you've been describing these lab lessons,
Mm-hmm.
like lab lessons from Australia. I love this. Um, so, I think it would be really interesting for whoever's listening right now to send this to their teaching partner or just a friend on campus or, their math coach or leader and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, can you listen to this episode? And then let's decide a thing that you talked about today, like a thing or two, do you
A
want to do
teacher move.
yeah,
Yeah.
some teacher, whatever, pick a thing. And then say, hey, which of these things do you want to work on? Which do I want to work on? Do you want to pick the same things? And then get together and like share time in each other's classrooms. Maybe you watch them and you take some notes about what they wanted to work on. Maybe they watch you. Look for
Mm.
what you did similarly. Like if you say, okay, hey, let's work on wait time. And then I watch you, you watch me. How long did you wait? Why did you wait? Was that long enough?
Was it
Um,
too long?
yeah, like have some
Mm-hmm.
comparison. Pam and I have talked before about when she and I would present together, we would
Mm.
map out a plan and then, we'd watch each other and we kind of stand in the back like, huh, that is not what I pictured. Or, huh,
That's
like she
not
added
what I
that.
would have done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
and then it gives you something to think about, right? It's not about better or it's wrong. It's just a way to analyze teacher moves and reflect, which is super important to perfecting our craft. And
Well, and
also,
Kim, oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Finish
go
your
ahead.
sentence.
Well, I was
What?
going to say, are you consistent? Did throughout the
Mm.
lesson you say, I'm going to use my thumb signal for private signal? And then did you fall away during the lesson? And you can just remind yourself every time, just, oh, private signal again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think that'd be fantastic PD to do with your teacher friend.
Amen. And what I was just going to say a second ago was those discussions that you and I had after presenting is kind of how this podcast came about.
Yeah.
Because Sue would listen in on us discussing what we learned from each other and ask each other, like, why did you do that? And as we sort of dig into each other and kind of under each other's thinking and our
Uh-huh.
perceptions and everything. And she's like, I think people would listen to you guys discuss this stuff. And she's kind of the one that talked us into the
Yeah.
podcast. So
She wasn't
Sue,
wrong.
thanks for that. We love it. All right, y'all. Hopefully, you got something out of my wonderful experience by having the opportunity to teach some students working in real classrooms where you could think about some of the teacher moves that might be the most important teacher move that you could work on right now. And y'all, thank you for tuning in and teaching more and more real math. To find out more about the Math is FigureOutable movement, visit mathisfigureoutable.com and keep spreading the word that math is FigureOutable. Thank you for listening and making math more figure-outable. If you missed it, registration is currently open for our Building Powerful Mathematics workshops.
Registration only opens 3 times a year. In these workshops is where you will find and learn all the things that you need to make math more figure outable. Find details at mathisfigureoutable.com/workshops.
Hey, K-12 educators, we have a workshop for you. Build your numeracy, build your mathematics, learn the teacher moves, equip yourself with the knowledge you need to have students naturally engaged in their learning. No matter what grade level you teach, we have a targeted workshop for you.
And you can find the best workshop for you at mathisfigureoutable.com/workshops.
Let's change the world together and make math more and more figure-outable.